Thank you so very much. Thank you for holding this important and timely briefing. Let's look at all of that. Does that look humanitarian? Does that look peaceful? The government of Iraq was to guarantee the safety and the security of the residents until they could be safely relocated. And the United Nations was to provide around-the-clock monitoring of this situation to ensure that no harm was done. Again, let's look at these pictures. Does it look like they are fulfilling those terms? Absolutely not. Yet here we are nearly 2 years later, and most Ashraf residents remain in an insecure environment in substandard Camp Liberty, while the very people who are supposed to provide for their safety are not upholding their obligations. There have been 3 attacks at Camp Liberty at this site this year. 3 attacks, resulting in numerous deaths, scores wounded, innocent civilians, innocent. Attacks also continue on Camp Ashraf and its residents. Last month's attack left more than 50 dead, execution style, and 7 residents, as we know, were kidnapped and remain hostages in Iraq. What makes this already horrible tragedy even more egregious is that this massacre was reportedly perpetrated by the very same Iraqi forces who are supposed to be protecting these residents. Now, I have called on Secretary Kerry and Secretary Clinton before him to demand that both the Iraqi government and the United Nations live up to their obligations under the Memorandum of Understanding to protect and prevent further attacks on these defenseless individuals. I have also communicated with the UN High Commissioner for Refugees, UNHCR, begging this agency to help all of the residents of Ashraf and Liberty, and I have personally urged the Iraqi government and the United Nations as a whole to do the same. This is an urgent humanitarian situation. It is a crisis, and time is of utmost essence. And that's why I thank you. I thank you for holding this briefing. I thank you for calling us together. And we will continue to do everything within our power to make sure that these residents are safe. Thank you so very much for the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Judge Poe. I like judges, too. Ladies and gentlemen, we've watched over a period of years while a group of people who were voluntarily disarmed by U.S. troops in 2003 were guaranteed protected person status under the Fourth Geneva Convention in July of 2004 in a writing signed by a major general of the U.S. Army that was reiterated by another major general of the U.S. Army who was commanding the multinational force in Iraq in October of 2005. We've stood by and watched while those people have been systematically slaughtered by Iraqi troops using weapons and equipment supplied by the United States and training provided by the United States, while the United States government has stood by and done nothing. In 2009 and 2011, as you've heard, a total of 47 people were killed in attacks that were recorded on video. The attacks took place while a U.S. Secretary of Defense was in country, in Iraq. An intentional slap in the face of the United States. The United States government asked the MEK to move from Ashraf to Liberty, asked 3,000 people to move, and left 100 behind by agreement to watch over the property that belonged to the people of Ashraf and the valuable installation there, and hinted that this was a price for removing the organization from the list of foreign terrorist organizations, a list on which it should never have been, and was only because of an ill-conceived sop to the Iranian government that didn't work. I went, along with Rudy Giuliani, to Paris and looked Mrs. Rajavi in the eye and asked her to cooperate in that move, and told her that she could trust the assurances of the United States government. And she agreed. It's hard for me to say that without my voice breaking and without my conscience breaking. Those guarantees have not been fulfilled. As the U.S. government withdrew, the Iraqis refused repeatedly to protect the residents and repeatedly launched attacks. There were rocket attacks on Camp Liberty that killed 10 people. The Iraqi government professes to be mystified at who perpetrated them. And then on September 1, 52 of the people who remained behind at Ashraf, as you've heard, were killed in cold blood. Many shot with their hands behind their backs. They had ID cards issued by the United States. Those cards, regrettably, were not bulletproof. They were cards like this. Protected person. You're a protected person. This is issued by the United States. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this isn't going to change by itself if we don't act. You know, we see scenes like that, and the sense, you get a sense that nature itself would rebel against it and do something. But it doesn't, folks. It goes on and on and on unless people like the people in this room and like the friends of the people in this room and like the government of the United States stand up and do something about it. So for God's sake, and for their sake, let's all stand up.
We've been discussing this for a long time. There were warnings. This isn't a surprise. It's a tragedy that we knew that something like this was possible, and we, meaning the United States of America, did not put the diplomatic and other kind of pressure on the Iraqi government to make sure that it didn't happen. This is shameful. Shameful on the part, of course, the Iraqi government that has no shame, but it's shameful on the part of the United States as well. We have here a situation where 50 of these unarmed people were massacred by Iraqi troops, but look very closely. What kind of weapons are the Iraqi troops using? They're American weapons. To think that we don't share some of the responsibility for this is to try to cover up and to basically to ignore what responsibilities we have when we put weapons into the hands of people like Maliki and these other tough guys who run Iraq and other countries in the Middle East. I'd say it is about time the United States just comes to grips with the fact that we bear certain responsibilities because we inserted ourselves into that region and into Iraq years ago in the last decade. And we have a certain responsibility because of that, and we're not meeting that responsibility. And that's why we have today what is a briefing on the murder and massacre of unarmed people, when if we would have met our responsibility, this would not have happened. By letting this go, and not having a aggressive response to this massacre, what we are doing is telling the mullah regime and their stooges in the Maliki government that they can get away with murder, and that the United States are basically cowards in order to actually stand up and do anything to stop them when they've got something in mind. Well, we need to send the message to Maliki, and we need to send the message to the mullahs. No, we are not cowards. And yes, we stand up with the people, the Iranian people and others who want democratic government and want individual human rights to be respected in their societies, that we are standing with them, and the ghoulish mullahs that run Iran don't think that we have the courage to do what's right. There will be more destabilization and more people murdered and more deaths, and many of them will be Americans in the long run. So today, I'm sorry that we all have to be here to see this. And as I say, the fact that these deaths were probably caused by troops carrying American weapons that were probably trained by American troops when we were there. But also, it is time to move to cut the Maliki regime off from any aid, military or otherwise, going to that country. And if we don't, the blood is on our hands as well, because we are financing this type of atrocity. So it's a sad day, but also I hope that someday we can help escort them back to a free Iran that is free of those ghoulish, bloody mullahs that control that country. I hope that we can have that day to celebrate, and that these martyrs that we will have recognized that they paid the price for the freeing of Iran, and by freeing Iran, making the world and America a safer place. Thank you very much.